Welcome back to the Biggest Youth Show. In the mother, Lindsay, make sure you guys are staying tuned all the way to 6 p.m. As of course, it is a Powerpuff situation.
Yes.
Because the girls are in the studio
Women
representing.
empowerment.
Of course, yesterday was International Women's Day, so we love all the women that are watching on the show. And speaking of women, today our topic is feminism as well as misandry. So I'm going to be talking about that a little more on. And if you missed the first part, we have an amazing panel in the studio today to discuss all things that have to do with feminism, darling.
So as you have said, we are continuing the conversation.
Yeah.
So I do have a question for you guys. How do you think that we can promote gender equality without belittling the other gender?
Very good question. And I think it goes back to things like I said before. There's a lot of stigma around menstruation. So that's a very big political and very, very significant conversation. I think having men involved in those conversations, because we can't run away from the fact that they also are part of the discussion, because we're talking about reproductive system here. We're talking about making babies. And that is a very important physiological system that speaks to, that whole process. I think including men in such conversations and seeing because they have the influence, they have the power to change and shift the way that our government responds and all of that. So I think having those open and inclusive conversations where we allow everyone's voices to be heard is very powerful.
Yeah.
Empowering, sorry.
Yes.
And
Empowering.
my question is
definitely.
adding on to that, actually, just asking, how can men play a role? Because I know there are some men out there who are saying, okay, I see what you guys are saying, feminism makes sense, but now where do I come in and say, okay, I'm joining this movement to help women move forward? Anyone can take it.
I think it has to do with men being open, open-minded. Look, change is something that is difficult for a person to adapt to, but it's a required thing. We need to have change, you know what I mean? So if men in society can actually be open-minded to an idea and not feel threatened by women, equally so when women can be respecting the men as well in their position, I think men can actually be, you know what I mean, be open to learn more about feminism and allowing even women to take up space in society. You know what I mean? But I think it just needs for us to bring awareness to men and you just ensure that men in society are open, just the willingness. Yeah.
I also think just the involvement of men in all these ideologies is rooted in the fact that they don't understand these ideologies.
Yeah.
So if we can get them to understand, I feel like we'd get them more involved. So if we get them to understand that feminism is not, it's fighting patriarchy and it's fighting the system, not men. I think that when they understand that, they will understand that, okay, now how do we get involved? Or try to get an idea of how to get involved.
Gotcha.
One last comment regarding this question. Upote made mention of respect, and I find that most time it's very one-sided. There's an expectation that women should be respectful, but men are not listening. Men are not respectful. So the issue there is then if we want to have a collaborative approach, we need to respect each other.
Granted, definitely. And also, I mean, look, the thing of feminism, it's almost like a recent thing that came to play in the modern age, you know what I mean? Historically, even back then, we grew up as men. I think we also need to understand them in a way. We grew up in an environment maybe where your women or not children or girls are not sent to school because ultimately they will end up in helping housewives and stuff like that back then, you know what I mean? Now, girls, females, they take up space, you know what I mean? And that's a good thing, and I support it, you know what I mean? So if the manner in which we introduce this awareness, I think also is important. I know there are some feminist advocates, and they are so rigid, they are so rigorous, you know what I mean? Like they're so fired up. You can't force something on a person who doesn't want to learn about it. I think if you take a right approach into introducing slowly this thing, because these people, some of the men in society that grew up being told in this way, you know what I mean? You cannot, teach an old dog new tricks, you know what I mean? Exactly. So it's the approach, I think it matters. How you do it matters. If you can find the right way in which we can bring awareness to these men, to these people out there, I think we can make progress.
And speaking of bringing about awareness and allowing people to understand the difference between feminism and misandry, what do you feel that we as a society, as male, as female, can do more to educate the people about this?
I think it's not a matter of trying to change people's mindsets. That is a slow process, if not an impossible one. It's about putting out the correct information about these ideologies, putting out the correct information about what feminism is and what it stands for. And then a person can then take this information and decide for themselves, am I now supporting this movement or not?
And then, but to go into your question, I want to find out, how can we make sure that we're educating ourselves? Like, are we as people speaking up individually, say, okay, in every platform that I get to talk about how I feel like women deserve a platform, etc. Am I doing this at work? Like, where does that space fill in? Because sometimes you know things and you're like, I'm gonna keep it to myself, or I'll know and I'll change my behavior, but I will not be preaching to y'all. So how can I make sure that I'm also spreading it to my capacity in 30 seconds, unfortunately?
Reading is very important, and communicating what you've read. I think that's a very effective way of doing it.
What about you?
I think I want to piggyback off the fact that it's not about forcing it onto people. It's not about forcing it onto people, because that will only create one, either just the further perpetuation that feminism is the hatred of men. Rather, it's also that forcing it upon people creates just performative feminists. So it's just a matter of providing information.
And then put them in 10 seconds.
Yeah, I also think that if females can come together and speak in one voice, educate one another, make sure there's no cracks, there's no hole between you as guys as female about the idea of feminism, then I think your voice can be louder. You can preach this idea of feminism even to men out there. But if there are people then who are against feminism amongst you females, then
it's through the unity, man. And in the unity, we are taking it to the city speaks rather. I'm asking you guys, what do you understand or say about?
And thank you so much for joining us, guys. Right now, let's see what the city's saying. Thanks.
So I think the first thing we need to do is like realize in ourselves like what any type of misogynistic tendencies we have, and then we have to start like in our circle. Because if you don't start like within and in a small space, we're not going to be able to do it out there after we've somehow managed to do that. Because it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be times where you're going to say things, you're going to do things. You must just hold yourself accountable. Like every time you think of something, be like, no, but that's not fair, that's not right. And then when other situations happen, you have to actually be active to actually go and fight for like these equal things. You can't just bystand and be like, no, I wouldn't do that. You have to also go there and actually engage. That's what I think people should do more. People a lot of the time they say they believe in this, but they don't act on it. That's the problem, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think there are a lot of ways to be better allies. I think, for one, just doing your own research. I think the example that you brought up, if a white person comes and asks you all these things, you get annoyed, right? So it's good to do your own research as well. I think just taking accountability of the ways that maybe you already are misogynistic, even to your friends. There's a lot of ways that can happen that are very small and maybe even invisible to you, right? And and your friends may never bring that up to you. So maybe even having those conversations, bring them up on your own. Like, hey, I wanted to ask you, have I ever done this? And it's okay to ask your friend that. And yeah, just like what they said before, just starting small, because it isn't just with jobs. It isn't just with like if I'm driving in a car and if I'm scared to stop at a gas station. It's more than that, right?
Just think about it from that standpoint. As a man, like, how would you want your mother to be treated? How would you want your sister to be treated in the workspace? Whether they're doing sports, whether they're in corporate, how would you want the closest female to you to be treated? And if you move forward and treat every female like that, I think we'd find again a better like common ground and a better future for sure.
We are back from the streets, back here in studio. Folks, we wish this show was so much longer because the topic of feminism is so essential. The reality is that feminism is for everyone. And again, thank you so much to Loa and Kezia and our wonderful guest for really just getting into the meat of feminism, but we know there's lots more. Right now, we've got an ad break, but make sure that you research, learn all that feminism has to offer.